Now, major developments in the fight against ISIS. The United States deploying nearly 200 more troops in Mosul, Iraq, to bolster security and help the forces there liberate the city from ISIS control. Fighting, of course, has become more and more intense. This on the heels of U.S.-backed Syrian rebel forces seizing an ISIS-controlled airbase just south of Raqqa. Joining me now to discuss the developments, Jessie Jane Duff and Ben Collins. Jessie Jane, boots on the ground as we start to circle in for the kill. You okay with this strategy?
Well, I think we've just about had enough of ISIS. This has dragged on for years. They took over the city. Al-Baghdadi, who leads ISIS, actually took over the city of Mosul about 3 years ago and declared it his caliphate. So essentially right now, we are now assisting to drive with the Iraqi coalitions to drive them out. Sadly, though, they are using civilians to protect their targets. They are in their homes. They're using them as shields, essentially. And because of recent bombings, we have to be exceptionally careful, because if we alienate the largely Sunni population of this city, the Shiite government of Iraq is right back where it started from and causing nothing but distrust between those two sanctions within the Iraqi communities.
Ben, you know, looking at news over the weekend, it feels tough to avoid not somehow doing some harm that we don't intentionally mean to do, or offending someone, particularly as we get to this sort of door-to-door fighting. So that's a risk, though. Isn't that a necessary risk, I guess, we have to take at this point?
Well, Charles, I think the differentiating fact is under the Obama administration, there were such tight rules of engagement that our soldiers were effectively not really able to start calling that air, calling those targets themselves. They were getting that information, that intelligence from our allies on the ground. Now, some of those allies have been very well trained, except the scope of this fight against Mosul, or against ISIS in Mosul, I think the shift that we can see now is if our soldiers are allowed to actually be on that battlefield, put their own eyes on the target so they can make the judgment call as to, is the collateral damage worth it? Can they have, clear judgment about the actual target? Hopefully that those rules of engagement will be peeled back a little bit and we can start seeing a reduction in civilian casualties, because there's nobody better at calling for those airstrikes than Americans.
Jessie Jane, of course, it feels like we've seen this movie before. Yeah. So it's not just a matter of winning, but it's also a matter of keeping the peace. And do you think the Iraqis at this point are up to the challenge to be able to secure this victory on their own after it's achieved?
After it's achieved, I should hope so. But I do think that we need to be there to assist them, because right now, with the airstrikes, approximately 200 casualties have occurred, and that would be the largest loss of life since the invasion. What cannot happen, what people may not understand, is that this government is run by the Shiites, and Sunni population is in Mosul, and they can't slaughter these people innocently. This particular city is very difficult to navigate through. It's called the Old City of Mosul, and it comes back from the Assyrian decades ago, Roman and Ottoman empires, and navigating through the city is exceptionally difficult. You've got alleyways and tunnels, and easily they can be ambushed and killed. They're trying to flush them out. The commanders are trying to circle and ensure that ISIS cannot escape, because you've got suicide bombers that essentially will kill them on their way out. Right. So they're trying to flush them, and it's going to be very difficult, and they're going to sweat, and there's going to be a lot of more death toll.
Of course, Ben, Russia today, Lavrov, they issued a warning to America to be careful. It's almost laughable considering how reckless they were, particularly in Syria. Nevertheless, the world is watching us, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely, Charles. Yes, and like you said, it's laughable. I mean, the Russians are the ones that bombed a convoy filled with medicine and food. Look at Raqqa today; it's absolutely destroyed. But I will say, look, I think it'd be very tough if we haven't learned our lesson from the first go around. We are not the ones capable of being the stabilization force. Not when you have the Turks and the Kurds and the Shias and the Sunnis and everybody else that's going to have something to do with it. So we need to think about how that war is going to end without us being in the middle of it.
Guys, thank you both very, very much. Always appreciate your passion and your expertise.